On November 14th of last year, my son David called to ask if I would host Thanksgiving. I said no. 2 words. The first time in 60 years. He said, of course, no problem at all. We hung up. I sat in my kitchen and waited for something terrible to happen. The family group chat went quiet for 7 days. Not angry quiet, not hostile quiet, just quiet. The way a room goes quiet when something unexpected happens, and everyone needs a moment to understand what they just heard. I am 86 years old, and I spent 60 years saying yes to everything this family asked of me. And the first time I said no, they needed a week to remember that I was a person who could do that. That is the thing I want to tell you, not about the no, about what the silence told me about all those years of yes. I should tell you what kind of yes person I was, so you understand the scale of the thing. I was a bookkeeper for 31 years. The same firm, same desk, same reliable presence that everyone counted on not to make mistakes and not to cause trouble. I was good at the work, and I was good at being the kind of person who made things run without anyone having to think about how they ran. That quality followed me home every evening and stayed there. I married Gerald in 1962. We had 3 children, David in 1964, Carol in 1966, and Susan in 1969. Gerald was a kind and somewhat impractical man who was very good at his work as a plumber and less good at the organizational life of a household and family, which meant that the organizational life fell entirely to me. I organized it completely and without complaint for over 30 years of marriage until Gerald died in 2016. I am not telling you this to suggest I resented it. I didn't, mostly. The organizing was something I was good at and something that produced results I valued. A house that ran, children who had what they needed, a family that showed up to occasions and left feeling fed and cared for. I built that. It was real and I was proud of it. And I don't want to revise the pride out of the story retroactively. But I also built something else alongside it without quite meaning to. I built a family that understood me primarily as the person who made things happen, who said yes, who had room, whose house was always available, whose calendar was always flexible, whose response to any request was, with vanishingly few exceptions across 6 decades, some version of course, when do you need me? My neighbor Phyllis is 80 years old. She has lived in the apartment next to mine for 11 years, and in that time, I have watched her relationship with her children with a mixture of admiration and something I have only recently been willing to call envy. Phyllis says no the way I drink my morning coffee, without drama, without particular deliberation, as a simple expression of what she does and does not want to do. Her children know this about her. They have always known it. And what they have as a result is a mother who is genuinely surprising to them, who has things going on they don't expect, who they call, not because something needs organizing, but because she is consistently someone they find interesting. Her daughter said something to me once where we were all in the hallway together that I have thought about nearly every day since. She said, I call Mom because she always makes me laugh and she's always doing something I didn't expect. She said it lightly as a simple statement of fact about her mother. I stood there and listened to that and I thought, I have never given my children the chance to call me for that reason. I have made myself so available, so consistently present and accommodating that there is nothing in my direction that could surprise them. They know exactly what I will say before they ask. I have been entirely predictable for 60 years. And predictability, I was beginning to understand, is not the same as being known. The no almost didn't happen. I want to be honest about that. When David called on November 14th and asked about Thanksgiving, my first instinct, the one that had been running for 6 decades, was yes, of course. What time are you thinking? How many people? I'll need to know by the 10th so I can plan the shopping. I don't know exactly what stopped me. Some combination of being 86 and tired in a specific way that is different from the tiredness of 60. And having read something earlier that week that I can't now remember, but that had put the question of my own willingness somewhere near the surface. I heard myself say in a voice that surprised me nearly as much as it surprised David, no, not this year. I think I need to sit this one out. A beat of silence on David's end. Then, oh, of course, Mom, absolutely. Are you feeling all right? I said I was fine, just needed a quieter year. He said, of course, of course. We said goodbye. I hung up the phone and I sat in my kitchen chair and I waited for the catastrophe I had been expecting at some low level for 60 years. The catastrophe that would arrive if I ever said no. The disappointment, the withdrawal of warmth, the proof that the yes had been the only thing holding any of it together. The family group chat went quiet. 7 days. Not a word. To understand what the silence meant, I have to tell you what 60 years of yes actually looked like. Because I think when people talk about saying yes too much, they imagine something dramatic. A person being pushed around, obvious pressure, clear resentment. That is not what it looks like from the inside. From the inside, it looks like competence. It looks like love. It looks like exactly what you would choose to do if someone asked you to describe what a good mother, a good woman, a good family member does. Thanksgiving 2008. I was 69 years old. David and his family were coming. Carol and her husband. Susan and her boyfriend at the time. My sister and her daughter. 14 people. On the Monday before Thanksgiving, I woke up with a sore throat. By Tuesday, it was a low fever, 103 degrees. By Wednesday morning, it was 103. I made the dinner, all of it. The turkey, the stuffing, 2 kinds, because Susan didn't eat the one with sausage. The mashed potatoes, the sweet potatoes, the green beans, the rolls from scratch, because I had always made them from scratch. And this year was not going to be the year I didn't. 14 people sat at my table and ate and talked. And David said, as he always said, that the stuffing was extraordinary. Nobody asked if I was all right. Not because they were cruel, because it had never occurred to them that I might not be. I had arranged the conditions so thoroughly for so many years that the idea of my not being available, my not managing, my not being entirely fine was simply outside the available categories. That is the thing about 60 years of yes. It doesn't just create expectation. It creates a version of you in other people's minds that has no room in it for the ordinary human truth that you sometimes don't want to, sometimes can't, sometimes need something to be different. You become, in their minds, a function, and functions don't get sick. Functions don't have bad weeks. Functions don't, at 86, need a quiet Thanksgiving. I have been the Thanksgiving function since 1971. That is 52 years. For 52 years, I produced Thanksgiving and Christmas and the Easter dinner and the summer gathering and the birthday cakes and the airport runs and the emergency childcare and the house that was always open and the answer that was always yes. And none of it, not 1 year of it, was without love. I want to say that again clearly. None of it was without love. The love was real. But love, expressed exclusively through accommodation across 60 years, teaches the people you love a specific and limited thing about who you are. It teaches them that you are someone whose primary orientation is toward their needs. It does not teach them that you have a self underneath the accommodation, opinions, preferences, limits, a particular way of being in the world that has nothing to do with what they need from you. They never learned that about me because I never gave them the chance to. Phyllis has always given her children the chance. I watched her once. We were both in the lobby when her son called, and she picked up right there, and I could hear her side of the conversation. He was asking her something about the holidays, and she said, with no apology and no explanation, "No, that doesn't work for me this year. What else can we do?" Just like that. The conversation continued. There was no drama. Her son proposed something else, and she said that worked better, and that was that. She hung up, and I must have had an expression on my face because she looked at me and laughed. "He's used to it," she said. "He's been hearing no from me since he was 12. He doesn't think it means I don't love him. He thinks it means I know my own mind." And she went upstairs. I went upstairs too, and I thought about that for the rest of the afternoon. What would it be like if my children assumed, when I said no, that it meant I knew my own mind? What would it be like if they had 30 years of evidence that I knew my own mind and said so, and that the no had never meant I didn't love them? They didn't have that evidence because I had never provided it. On the 4th day of the group chat silence, I made dinner for myself, just myself. I was alone in the apartment. No grandchildren coming, no one I needed to feed. I made a small pot of soup, one bowl. I set the table the way I always set the table, because I had always believed eating at a properly set table mattered, regardless of the number of people. One placemat, one bowl, one spoon. I sat down and I looked at the single bowl of soup, and I thought, I have made food for other people for 60 years. And I do not think I have ever sat down to a meal that was entirely and only for me. There was always someone else's hunger in it, someone else's preference, someone else's portion. Even when I ate alone, the size of the pot was organized around the possibility of someone else. The right size pot, the single bowl. It felt strange for about 2 minutes. And then it felt, with a clarity that surprised me, entirely correct. This was the right amount of soup. It was exactly enough. I ate it without hurrying because there was no one to clear for. And I sat at the table afterward with my tea, and the apartment was quiet, and I was not lonely. That surprised me more than anything. I had assumed that the other side of 60 years of yes, the side where you say no and the family goes quiet, would feel like loneliness. It felt like something else. It felt like being in a room where there was enough space to turn around. On the 7th day, Carol texted. She wrote, "Mom, is everything okay? We haven't heard from you." I read that text 3 times, not because it was complicated, because it was the first time in as long as I could remember that one of my children had reached toward me to find out how I was rather than what I could do. The phrasing was simple, "Is everything okay?" But the impulse behind it was something I had not received in a very long time. Maybe not since the children were small, and I was the one who could be worried about because I was young and the world was large and anything could happen. I wrote back, "Everything is fine. I just needed a quiet year. How are you?" She called me that evening. We talked for almost an hour. Not about Thanksgiving, not about logistics, not about who was going where and what needed to be organized. We talked about her work, which she has been doing for 20 years, and which I realized I knew almost nothing about in any real sense. We talked about her daughter, my granddaughter, who is doing something with her life that Carol told me about in detail and that I found genuinely interesting. At the end of the call, Carol said, "Mom, I'm glad you said no. I think we've been taking you for granted." She said it the way you say something you've been thinking for a while and have finally located the words for. Not as a confession, as a statement of fact she had just arrived at. Susan called 2 days later, David the week after. None of them were angry. None of them brought up Thanksgiving as a grievance. They seemed to be, and this is the part I have had the most trouble finding words for, recalibrating, adjusting their picture of me to include a version that had an interior, that had preferences, that could say no and mean nothing by it, except that I needed something to be different. That recalibration is still happening. I am watching it. It is imperfect and slow, and my family is not suddenly a different family. They still sometimes forget to ask, still sometimes assume, still sometimes call because something needs organizing, rather than because they wanted to talk to me. We are in the early stages of something, not the end of it. But the something is real. The no produced it, and 60 years of yes had made it impossible. Here's what I think was true about those 60 years of yes, and what I want to say to you if you are living inside a similar pattern. The yes felt like love. It was love. I am not taking that back. But it was also, underneath the love, something more complicated. It was a way of being necessary that never required me to be vulnerable. If I was always giving, always available, always the one who made things work, I never had to find out what would happen if I wasn't. I never had to discover whether my family would come toward me if I wasn't offering something. The yes protected me from that question. It protected me from the terrifying possibility that the answer might be no, that without the function, there was nothing to come toward. The answer was not no. Carol called. Susan called. David called. They came toward me when I wasn't offering anything, when I was just sitting in my apartment with my small pot of soup and my quiet wheat and my single bowl at the table. They came because I am their mother and they love me, and they would have come earlier if I had given them the chance. If I had 30 years ago said no to something and let them discover that the no didn't mean anything catastrophic, that I was still there, still their mother, still someone they could reach toward, they might have been calling me the way Phyllis's daughter calls her, not because something needs doing, because they want it to. I don't know if it's too late for us to fully build that. I am 86. The time available is what it is. But I said no to Christmas hosting last month, and the group chat went quiet for 3 days this time, not 7. And David organized it himself, imperfectly, chaotically, with several panic calls, asking questions I could have anticipated if I'd been the one doing it. And everyone had a fine Christmas, and nobody needed me to make it happen. That was the most surprising gift of the year. Not being needed, just being there. If you have been saying yes for longer than you can remember, if the people in your life have stopped even noticing that they're asking because you've never given them reason to wonder if you might not, I want to ask you to try one no. Something small, something you genuinely don't want to do, something you would normally say yes to out of habit rather than desire. Say no, and then sit with what comes after. Not defensively, not triumphantly, just with attention. The silence, if it comes, is not punishment. It is your family, your people, whoever they are, encountering for the first time the possibility that you are someone who makes choices. Give them a week to understand what that means. They will come through it, and you, on the other side of the silence, will know something about yourself and about them that 60 years of yes could never have taught you. Tell me in the comments, what have you been saying yes to for so long that the people in your life have stopped thinking of it as a choice? Because I said yes to everything for 60 years, and I thought that was love. I'm 86, and I now think it was something more complicated than that. And the no I finally said taught me more about my family and about myself than all of those years of yes put together.